Yeah, can everyone hear us? Okay. On the Zoom. Awesome. So yeah, hi everyone. We're super excited for all of you to be joining us this weekend for IDEATE. We have a weekend full of workshops, talks, and a design challenge lined up for you, and we're going to kick it off with the opening ceremony now. So we're happy to announce that we'll actually be holding a raffle for $20 Amazon gift cards. All of our events will have a sign-in form at the end of them, and each time you attend an event, there'll be a sign-in form, and you'll get one entry into the raffle. So stay tuned to the end of this opening ceremony for the sign-in form. Submitting a project to our design challenge is also worth an entry, and we'll talk more about the challenge soon. But first, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Raymond. I'm a sophomore at Duke, and I am majoring in electrical computer engineering and computer science, and I've been a part of Hack Duke for 2 years now.
Hi, I'm Naomi. I'm also a sophomore at Duke. I'm double majoring in computer science and statistics, and we're really happy to be your co-directors for Hack Duke this year. So what is Hack Duke? Hack Duke is a student organization that's worked very hard to put all of this together for you guys. We are a team of around 30 undergrad Duke students, and we host events centered around tech, social good, and innovation. And our main event is Code for Good, which is the nation's largest hackathon for social good. So we hope you'll come back in the fall and join us for that. And we also host IDEATE every spring.
Which is the event that you're all at now.
Yeah. So if you've been to IDEATE in the past, you'll notice that it changes a little bit every year. But at its core, IDEATE is a design thinking conference filled with awesome speakers, workshops, and a design challenge to explore how design and innovation interact. Through IDEATE, we want to inspire students from all backgrounds to incorporate design thinking as part of their everyday lives. We want to show that design isn't just art. It's a problem-solving method for anyone to create intuitive, meaningful, and ethical solutions that affect many communities and environments.
So this is we'll give a quick overview of what this weekend is going to look like. We have a lot of really cool workshops and speakers lined up. After the opening ceremony, we'll have a total of 4 more workshops and talks today, as well as the closing ceremony tomorrow. We highly encourage all of you to attend to pick up some really useful and interesting skills, meet some awesome people, and get some ideas for the competition. To see the full schedule of times and Zoom links or locations for these talks, make sure to check out the Notion Guidebook, which we have sent to all of you by email. And we've also sent some messages in the Discord, and we'll also have the links up at the end of this presentation. Don't forget, again, that for each event you participate in, you'll have an entry into a raffle when you sign in. So I'm going to go over a bit about the design challenge. So at Hack Duke, we want to emphasize our commitment to social good, and we do that through having 4 unique project tracks. So first off, we have education, and this track is about empowering students, young and old, by building new ways to teach and learn. Especially as the pandemic changed the way many of us learn, now is a great time to innovate. We can solve problems. We want to solve problems such as how we approach equity in education, how we can take advantage of remote learning, or how we address disparity in education access. Next, we have inequality. The inequality track targets problems regarding both social and economic inequality. Whether it is creating solutions to bridge the income gap or find ways to reduce disparities in gender or race, this track is built on the principle that everyone should have the capacity to reach their full potential. Next, we have health and wellness. Almost 500 million people across the world still lack access to basic health, and even less are able to afford expensive treatments and diagnostics for more severe conditions. In the health track, we want participants to think about how we can improve the quality, efficiency, and accessibility of healthcare. In addition, we need to think about modern public health challenges such as mental health, nutrition, and diet. Lastly, we have energy and environment. As the effects of climate change become increasingly pronounced, we must be thoughtful about how to care for the planet that we share. Products in this track will seek to help us make our lives more sustainable, including but not limited to teaching others how to ethically consume and create greener technologies for the future. As for the design challenge, this year we're changing up the design challenge a bit just to make it more focused on the idea. But let's start off with what's staying the same. The design challenge is meant to be open-ended. We want you to come up with a solution to a problem you see in one of the 4 tracks. The solution can be anything: websites, apps, hardware, services, anything. Any and all ideas are welcome. As for the deliverables, we have 3 Ps: presentation, prototype, and promotion. So the presentation will be a 5-minute presentation with 5 minutes of Q&A from the judges afterwards. In the presentation, A, you want to describe the problem your solution addresses and how it relates to the track you selected. Then you want to address how your solution tackles that problem. C, we want we want you to talk about the target customer and the audience for your solution. Then you'll have a prototype demo, which we'll talk a bit more about later. And lastly, we want to learn about how you envision this product developing in the future if you were to take further steps. For the prototype, as mentioned, the prototype will also be a part of the presentation. And really, the prototype can be anything that serves as a proof of concept for your idea. It can be something like a video, it can be a wireframe on Figma. Really, it can be anything as long as it demonstrates the idea. Lastly, we have the promotion, which is new this year. As great as our judges are, they're not necessarily the target audience or the customer for the solutions that you are all designing for. We want to gauge public interest in your solution, and we're going to do that through online advertising. We'll fund online advertising for the selected finalists based on the presentation and prototype components. And this section will be evaluated based on social media interactions, as well as a linked form on the social media advertisements to allow the public to provide direct feedback for your ideas. Make sure to check out the guidebook, which will contain all of these details, and then remember to submit to the dev post by 1 p.m. on Sunday with relevant links and materials. For the prizes, we have 4 track prizes, 1 for each track. So education, inequality, health and wellness, energy and environment. And those will be based on the presentation and prototype sections. The track prize winners will each earn a donation under their team's names to a charity of their choice with an amount of $300. And then for the grand prize, as mentioned earlier, we will be evaluating the promotion component as well, where the top overall submissions will market their products. So the grand prize will be given to the top overall team based on all 3 components: presentation, prototype, and promotion, and will be a donation of $300. This could be won in addition to a track prize. We encourage everyone to submit and present their solution regardless of team size or design experience, and it is entirely possible to win an event or win an award even if all you have is like a short presentation and not the design experience.
So we obviously have a lot going on this weekend. So to help you keep track of everything, put it all into the mission guidebook. So this page has the full schedule, links to everything you'll need, detailed instructions on the design challenge, and more. And in addition, we'll be sending out communications through Discord through this whole weekend. So make sure to join if you haven't already. We'll also be holding our mentor office hours tomorrow on Discord, and we have a few lovely mentors who are going to be on Discord to answer any technical questions you might have to help you with the design challenge. So with all that out of the way, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for IDEATE 2022, Sridhar Ramaswamy. Sridhar is the CEO and co-founder of Neeva, a revolutionary search engine startup. He'll be talking about his journey and his work in a Q&A format, moderated by Dr. Martin Ruef. Dr. Ruef is the Pamela and Jack Egan Professor of Entrepreneurship in Duke's Department of Sociology. He also directs the Innovation Entrepreneurship Certificate for graduate students. And his research considers the social context of entrepreneurship from both a contemporary and historical perspective. So without any further ado, please take it away, Sridhar and Dr. Ruef.
Good morning, Sridhar.
Hi, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Absolutely, it's going great. Thanks for joining us
Thank you.
so early.
I start my day at 5 a.m., so this is well into my day. Happy to be chatting.
Wait, you have plenty of coffee already. So I'm very pleased to moderate this Q&A. Ordinarily, I begin with an extensive archaeological excavation of Sridhar's resume. We might begin with his experiences as senior VP at Google, or talk about his work as a partner at Greylock, a leading venture capital firm. We could dig into his education as a computer scientist, getting a PhD at Brown, or talk in detail about his influential paper on efficient algorithms for mining outliers from large data sets, which I think is still worth reading. But that would consume most of the next hour. So we want to get into it. And first of all, start with Sridhar, have him give a pitch for the idea that is Neeva, and then I'm going to turn to the questions I've collected from the audience. Sridhar.
Oh, thank you so much. The first lesson that I learned the hard way is that a startup founder has to be pitching all the time. So I'll start with that. So Neeva.com is a simple but revolutionary product. It starts with the observation that search is a daily use product for all of us, very useful, incredibly personal, and a business that is larger than any of us can really imagine. So Neeva is the world's first ads-free private subscription search engine. That means that it's working for you from day one. It puts you in charge of what your search experience is. It helps you when you're looking for things, and it's designed with a single goal in mind, to provide the best search engine for you, not advertisers. We're a 3-year-old company. We're funded by Greylock and Sequoia, and we're about 70 people. We're a little bit of an unusual company in that the founders are relatively senior execs. Typically, companies are started by young folks. But it's been a great, it's been a great journey for all of us. And there are many people in the team that worked on search before, and are just really excited by the idea of recreating, rethinking so foundational a product. And so that's us, Neeva, Neeva.com. It is the you first search engine.
Great, very efficient pitch. The elevator would have only passed 3 floors during that time.
By the way, Reed, who's on my board, made my life miserable for several weeks by insisting that I work on a single sentence pitch, a 3-sentence pitch, and a 3-word pitch. It's actually a deeply humbling, but very focusing exercise for any startup founder. If you can't describe what you're doing in 3 or 4 words, there's generally some amount of trouble.
Let's talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial origins. What made you want to start Neeva?
As I said, I'm an unusual entrepreneur. I was I was 50 when I started Neeva. And for the record, I was a terrible entrepreneur. I was a terrible entrepreneur in my youth. Tried my hand at bringing stuff from India and selling it here. And that didn't go too well. I did moonlight with jobs when I was in grad school. But they were like side jobs, not really truly starting new things. But the one quality that I brought to the table always is a willingness to adapt, a willingness to change, a willingness to look at things from a new perspective. And really at Google, I learned from some of the best, smartest entrepreneurs ever, including Larry, who is not only a visionary, but also an amazingly shrewd and tough businessman. Neeva at its core was very simple. Many of us had worked on search. We wanted to rethink the product, and we made a bold bet that there was a market, that there would be people that paid for it. So that's like the essence of Neeva. There's a lot of painful adoption when you go from a team that basically has infinite resources to a tiny team. You have to adapt to that. And so the kind of things that I did before that made me feel more confident that I could do a reasonable job was I always liked the process of creation. I love participating in the hackathons that my teams ran at Google because it was pure creation. There was that elemental joy in it that always stayed with me. And so with Neeva, we started with this core thesis that by putting the customer first, there is a much better product. And the follow-up thesis to that was the business model, which is by putting the customer first and creating a daily use product, there will be a set of people that will pay for the product. The rest is detail that all of you know, which is software is relatively infinitely scalable, meaning that unless you have like licensing issues like Spotify, where people are asking you for money, the amount of money that it costs to deliver software for like 100 million people compared to 1 billion people is more or less the same. In other words, the curve decreases a lot. But those are like subsequent things. The core idea really was we can create a better search engine, and there are enough people that will want to pay for it if we create a great product.
You mentioned that you had to develop a 3-word pitch or so. Naming and branding is very important. Where did the name Neeva come from?
Yeah, it doesn't come from anywhere. Unfortunately, getting names is really hard these days. Every site is taken and every trademark is taken in sort of unfortunate engineer fashion, I literally wrote down a set of syllables whose sound felt good to my ear. And we went and looked at all possible two-word combinations. And, we could get Neeva.co and we could get a patent. We could get a trademark on the word Neeva. And that's sort of where it came from. And, there are related things. There's the river Neva in Russia. And Neev in Hindi also means foundation, but there is no such poetic story. We jumbled up a bunch of names and, out came Neeva. I don't quite know what it means, but it was it was fun nevertheless. It's a very prosaic story, not a poetic one.
Right. So we want to think a little bit about the skills that you need as an entrepreneur. For you personally, would you say that soft skills or technical skills were more important in founding your company?
I mean, this varies by this varies by area. I would actually say that I don't quite know whether I would call it a skill, at least in the sense of something that one can, like hone and iterate and get better. It is possible, but in my personal opinion, the most important quality that a founder needs to have is the ability to visualize something in the future, combined with which is like the big thinking, the crystallization of a solution for a need, but combined with the ability to think in the micro of how do I go from here to there. Lots of people can think big about, here's this great thing that I wish existed. And a lot of people can tell you, okay, here's what I think I can do today. But there are very few people that can think big and act small and create a path for getting there. Because it's important to remember that a startup needs to prove itself over and over again, many, many times. When you start, you're selling the idea. But once you have, let's say, in a software startup, a few engineers, you want something tangible delivered in the first month, and you have to show it to people, and you have to get that positive feedback. And so, similar to life, a startup is creating something from within, constantly shedding the outer layer and creating something bigger, and sort of gradually expanding out from there. So it's really this duality of thinking: think big, act small, create the path. There are many paths that you can take to go from small to big, but it's really that ability that I think characterizes a great founder. As I said, I'm a little bit hesitant to call that a skill, genuinely because I just don't know.
Let's talk about going from big to small. Switch it up a little bit. You were working at Google before this. It seems like a pretty good gig. What made you want to switch and start your own startup?
Funny story of my Google career. When I joined Google, I had just come off of a bruising job at a startup where I ran a team of 100 people and had very tempestuous relationships with my bosses, the SVP and CEO, and so on. And so my stated goal when I went to Google was to be an IC and be completely left alone. In fact, I told my friends then, my objective was to sit alone in a room, talk to nobody, drink coffee, and write code. That was my objective in life. It lasted for a year, so I took on more management responsibility, so much so that by the time I left, I was running a team of over 10,000 people, making over $100 billion in revenue. Neeva with two co-founders came after that. So it's a bit of an interesting transition, clearly. I left for a number of reasons. One, I didn't really want to work on ads anymore. I had worked on ads for 15 years. And at some point, I just decided that I didn't really like the ecosystem, which I had helped create part of it. I still didn't like it. I wanted to kind of go back to things that kind of gave me joy. And that was like working in smaller settings. Clearly Vivek and I, my co-founder, were also ambitious enough, naive enough, and arrogant enough to think that we could take search and create a better search. So it's really a combination of all three. And one of the qualities that's characterized my life, at least, is it's just change, learning new things, trying to learn new skills, failing spectacularly. I learned guitar for 10 years as my kids were growing up. And I kind of don't really have much to show for it, except like, I can tell you how to construct really complicated chords. I can't really play them at any speed. And so there's lots of stuff that I've tried and kind of failed at and succeeded at. This is another example of that, but it's on something that I think is really worthwhile. The world needs competition. Search is dominated by one company, and yet it's a portal to information for billions of people. The idea, the audacity that you can think differently about such a product, make it freely available for a lot of folks, while some people pay for the paid version of the product. It's an exhilarating thought. It's a big thought, but there's also the micro, as I said, of how do we get from here to there. And that's really what the journey has been about for the past 3 years.
Also had experience at Greylock. How did that impact your approach to Neeva?
So I was and am still a venture partner at Greylock. Because investing is hard, contrary to popular opinion. It takes a lot of time and enormous amounts of essentially like map making. You have to construct landscapes of opportunity, where companies are, where there are openings. I'm fortunate to work with a great group of people. And right after I left Google, I spent about 4 months pretty much looking at investing full time before starting Neeva. It was a lot of fun. It's fun to meet entrepreneurs, fun to meet people with great ideas. I've done a few seed investments. I'm on the board of one privacy engineering company that I invested on behalf of Greylock for. And it's been a good experience and continues to be a great experience, because you get to see where the market is headed, where people are seeing opportunities. Sometimes you can tell founders where there is opportunity, and they will run with it and do a much better job than what you could have done. So it keeps me abreast of the ecosystem, and investing is a lot of fun, but it's also a different kind of relationship than being a creator of a company. And the example that people gave me as I was starting at Greylock was, Sridhar, being an investor is like being a grandparent. Okay, it's like, yep, you get to play with your grandchild and spend happy time, or sometimes slightly difficult times, but at the end of the day, you leave. It's the parents, the owners of the company that are creating it. And so people have to be ready for that kind of a relationship. It's a different mindset.
Since we're at IDEATE, we're going to get into the process of ideation next. What was your first coding project, first big coding project?
Gosh, see, I grew up in India. Definitely not a lot of computers when I was in high school or anything like that. I think my kids started coding when they were in middle school. And so by the time they finished college, they would have, I think, done like 8-9 years of coding. My first coding project was on, if I remember correctly, like this IBM 370. And we submitted punch cards. It was sorting or some other simple example program that we had to run. I remember having fun trying to solve the, in true geek fashion, the 8 queens problem on the computer. It's combinatorial search to figure out how you can place 8 queens on a chessboard. Yeah, it was interesting. It's one of those things where mistakes were terrible in terms of how much time they cost you. And so quite a few of us could look at a punch card and read letters because we were so worried about making mistakes.
You want to get a sense of what inspires your project ideas and coding ideas. I assume it's not the punch cards. The ideas come from somewhere else. What do you find inspirational in terms of coming up with ideas?
Yeah, I mean, along the way, at least for me, it was really the discovery that I could think of something new and actually make it come alive. To me, that's still the joy that I have with software engineering. with just a computer and a keyboard and nothing else, we can conceive of an idea and we can figure out how to develop a solution for it. And at least for me, programming was and is a task where time stands still, meaning that I could be coding for 2 hours, I could be coding for 5 hours. It doesn't really matter. It's one of these things that I can do essentially for infinite amounts of time. I also discovered I could do that with video games and had the good sense to stop doing that. And so to me, it's really that combination. It is one, you can conceive of ideas. Some of them might not go anywhere, but much more importantly, it could immerse me in a way that didn't feel like work, that didn't feel at all like something you had to do. It was something joyful to do and something that like deeply absorbed me. And it's really the combination of these two things that convinced me that working in software engineering, working with people was something that, that was my life's calling, so to say.
Bring design thinking into it a little bit. What's the role of design thinking from your perspective? Is it practical? How do you blend design and technology?
Complex products that we want used by lots of people, just generally speaking, a common aspiration for all creators is a complicated process. It has specialties. In some ways, a CEO wears the hat of representing a lot of different constituents that need to go into making the product. But at the end of the day, there is the interaction that our users are going to have with our product, which is visual, which involves time. It involves changes in the screen. It involves feedback back to the user and then input from the user. I tend to think, generally abstractly. I do always try to put like a potential user, a potential customer in my mind's eye as I am thinking about how they're going to use my product. But for example, I will write down sort of sequences of interactions in text. But what great designers bring to the table is their ability to visualize very differently, to visualize at the product level, how these abstract ideas of interaction translate into something tangible that you and I see and can interact with. So in many ways, you sort of need these kinds of skills. There is visual design, but there is also interaction design. And pretty much every modern product needs to have people that are excellent at these aspects. And if you're doing like iPhone apps, for example, the bar is even higher, where people also have to think about things like motion design. How does that fit into the picture? So having those skills, and sometimes the founder might have them, but certainly I don't. And as I said, I tend to think abstractly. I tend to think a little bit more verbally. And so working with people like we in my team, where they make it come alive in terms of experiences that our users and customers actually see, is a very joyful and collaborative experience. And then you have to overlay that with things like what is possible, what can be implemented well. So it's a fun group exercise to create a product.
You mentioned the users as a key constituency here. How do you engage in user testing for your products?
I mean, first and foremost, I repeatedly tell myself, my team, whether it's design or UX engineers or product managers, we always need to have them in our mind's eye. And whenever we design something new, remember, like even a company like Neeva doesn't get to redefine what Neeva is every single day. The process is much more, much more iterative. But at all times, I try to encourage them to like clear their head literally of their knowledge of the product and apply a new user's eye, a child's eye to the entire experience. To me, that kind of user-centric thinking, think like your user, feel that user, has to start in like every screen, every design that any team goes through. It's a hard skill, by the way. If I have to read something I wrote, I literally spend 15 seconds like trying to make myself still so I can erase my context about what it is that I've already written, so I can read it with a clean slate. Similarly, with a design, you sort of have to very consciously put yourself in the shoes of a potential user and then go through the design. So that's like the first part. Think like a user, act like a user as you're designing the product. We use this site called user testing, and we do a ton of user interviews when we want to talk to people that are not existing Neeva users. Now you're getting into a little bit of like bucketing users into different categories. There's one set of design that is primarily focused on existing users of the product, but many companies, Neeva included, also think a lot, sometimes a lot more about how you want to get new users, because we're constantly thinking about 10xing, which means that the 9x has to come from outside. And so having that mindset, using sites like user testing, it's expensive, but we do a lot of those kinds of user interviews. They can be interactive sessions, or they can be recorded sessions where you watch what someone is doing. We also do interviews and user testing sessions with existing Neeva users. In both of these cases, we spend a lot of time on things like writing the user scripts and making sure that they are vetted. These scripts are very critical, and you almost need to think of them as code. You need to have like a change review process. It is not easy, for example, to ask leading questions. And so there is science and psychology behind user research when you're writing down scripts or when you're doing questions. We also use surveys heavily. There are lots of tools for this. We use SurveyMonkey. Again, there's a lot of gotchas and things that you can get wrong in that. But my overall process of sort of design and ideation roughly is think of an area where you want to have an impact. Perhaps it is informed by feedback from existing users or feedback from potential new users. Form some hypotheses. Maybe you'll write up a mock, maybe you'll write up a potential solution, and then iterate in the small. That is, talk to real people, get the feedback, write down notes, record the sessions, understand them to make sure that you're capable of asking the right questions. And when you're confident that you can ask questions that can be reliably answered, and that's tricky, then you can get into slightly more scaled user testing, where you use a survey tool, for example, where you get feedback. And then the ultimate gold standard is you implement the best ideas, and then you do more of a controlled A/B test, where you look for statistically significant differences. But this basic process of ideate, talk to a few, amplify, A/B test is a loop that lots and lots of people can use. If you're a tiny startup, you might decide to cut all of this and do 2 interviews and create the next screen. That's fine. Take the shortcuts that you need to do. But the basic methodology is very, very clear.
When you engage with a range of users, what's the role of design and advocating for equity and inclusion, including for people with disabilities?
Absolutely. And so we have a set of design principles about everything from what imagery we use to what colors we use to how do we illustrate the examples that that we have within the product. What do our help pages say? So we are careful about that. We have brand guidelines. We also have like design guidelines internally for how we think about new designs. Accessibility is basically, it's expensive. We have not finished all of the work that we need to do on that side in terms of being accessible to people with disabilities. That's a little bit of a work in, it's a work in progress. And this is a struggle for any startup. If you want to get all of those things right, then you run the risk that you might not have anything that is worthwhile. So you have to figure out the right kind of corners to cut early on. For example, like we are US only, and we are only now thinking about expanding to other countries. And so you do have to make these kinds of choices. But I would say that almost at the level of, not almost, at the level of a company, we have strong principles around how we want to treat each other, how different disciplines need to behave. I tell people, for example, that I want Neeva to be an excellent company. We're not an engineering company. We're not a product company. We're not a design company or a sales company. We want to be excellent at what we do. And we hold ourselves to a high standard in terms of, making sure that our products is welcoming and conveys the right intent to all of the users that we initially intend for it to be used by. It's a hard topic.
Great. We're going to move to the big picture now and talk about the evolution of information society. Is privacy an inevitable cost to access free information?
Yeah, you've packed a lot into that question. Small number of words, but it's a very big question. Let's sort of deconstruct that. You said free information. So implicit is a value judgment there that all information should be free. It is in fact not so. And what we have all inadvertently ended up with is a set of products that are ad supported. And we have come to believe that that is the only way in which we can get at information. I point to people that there are many, many, many things in life that we all take for granted that we nevertheless pay for and are pretty happy to pay for. This is everything from the electricity in our homes to the water that flows through our taps, to many things, the internet that we use for internet access. And so I think it is a myth created by the advertising industry that advertising is the only way to get at information. At one level, while it is true that lots of websites are free, the fact of the matter is that the ad-supported ecosystem has resulted in a massive influx of low-quality sites, and the ad model generally operates in such a way that it obscures for us what is useful or authoritative or reliable information from one that's just out there to sort of catch our eye and get the ad dollar. And so, going back to another word that that you used, privacy or lack thereof. Again, I think it is the myth created by the advertising industry that you need to have free products because, oh my God, that is the only egalitarian way in which things can happen. Oh, and the only way to support advertising is by all of us giving up privacy. To me, this is nonsense. And the economic way in which I rebut this argument is to say, it doesn't cost much to run Facebook in the big scheme of things. It doesn't cost much to run Google search. I would estimate that the operational cost of Google search is $1 billion. And Google makes over $100 billion in revenue for search. And so with this myth of free, what we have implicitly agreed to is a head tax of $150 per living person in the United States that we all pay directly or indirectly to Google. We approach this problem the other way, and we say, we want to create a product that a fraction of people will find valuable, and we can make the product free for everybody else. In some ways, I'm not saying anything revolutionary. This is kind of how innovation works. Technology, as I said, can scale infinitely. And so the cost of creating products is not that high. And rather than have this be an either or, free information our privacy, we reject this argument and say, as technologists, we feel confident enough about creating inexpensive technology that you can have privacy and great products.
We live in a society where companies are constantly collecting our data as we use their products. How can we be more aware of that process? Should people have open access to their personal data if it's collected by another party and puts user privacy and safety at risk?
Yeah, there are a whole lot of solutions that people propose that kind of create busy work while not really making anything a whole lot better. We take a common sense approach at Neeva. We make a tracking prevention software that is included in our extension, which is what you get. Like if you go to neeva.com and install our extension, the tracking prevention software comes for free. And roughly speaking, the way it acts is it says when you interact with a site, the site can and will know what you did with the site because you're sending requests to the site. We think there should be a future in which there are a set of one-on-one interactions between a user and a site with clearly defined boundaries. For example, many of you go through cookie consents. I bet all of you hate it. Cookie consents are designed in a way that they just wear you down. Even if you make choices and say like, hey, I don't want tracking cookies, what sites will do is they will show that request to you again and again and again. And you just have to click allow all once and the prompt disappears forever. And so like we don't want to create situations in which sort of big companies with a lot of technological prowess always win. We envision a world in which we have one-on-one interactions with sites, just like we have with people, with reasonable expectations of privacy. For example, I don't think any company should have the right to take our interactions and hand it off to some other site, even if they have crazy schemes by which they can get our consent. That's the kind of world that we need to be driving towards. And of course, again, the ad industry will come up and say like, oh my God, you're killing the ad industry because that's what supports the free internet. No, the free internet as it is today supports the ad industry. It doesn't really support you or me. And we need much simpler understanding and expectation of privacy. I said our answer is the online world needs to move to a model of one-on-one interactions. And that's the simplest way that people can understand how they're interacting with a site.
Let's think for a moment about laws and regulations governing privacy and data security. How do you think they're lagging behind the development of the tech?
Yeah, so it's very hard. GDPR was a disaster. Well-intentioned, still a disaster. I think, well, you asked both about law and about regulation and implicitly about enforcement. I think legislation should be focused on big picture topics, like how a few companies are monopolizing large swaths of the internet and effectively imposing taxes on all of us. There is a Google tax, head tax that we all pay. There's a Facebook head tax we all pay in the name of getting free products. I think and my personal take is that sort of the Borkian interpretation of antitrust law and the attempt to provide an economic basis for antitrust law has taken what is essentially a political construct that very large companies are inherently anti-democratic simply because they're about serving, one small set of people and not the larger society. And so I think the government needs to do a much better job of sort of taking antitrust back to its roots of really preventing, trust, very large companies from dominating areas and making sure that there is free competition. I think they should be very sparing in the kind of laws that they pass around things like privacy. It's a very complicated concept. If anything, they should pass a broad law and give mandates to people like the FTC, perhaps create a new agency staffed by professionals and specialists that are the ones that are going to be enforcing things, on the ground. I'll end this section with like 2 points. Many of you will be shocked to know that my friend Kent Walker, who heads the legal team at Google, has more lawyers in his team than the FTC does. And the FTC, remember, is overseeing all of trade within our country. And the second point that I will make is that the hardest problem facing Neeva is not our ability to create a good product, is not our ability to get people to pay for the premium version of the product, is literally our ability to get in front of people where every browser door is closed, where Chrome will throw up ugly warnings, even if people voluntarily switch their search engine to Neeva. And it is in situations like that where the government needs to do a much better job trying to get into the minutiae of privacy and privacy law, like the EU did with GDPR, is simply not going to produce anything useful in a world that is rapidly changing and honestly has a lot of depth, plus enormous expertise on the part of tech companies to circumvent and skirt any regulation or law that's passed.
I think you point out a lot of shortcomings of the top-down approach here. Kind of a bottom-up approach is to focus on decentralized blockchains, which are now an integral feature of the evolution of information society, sometimes under the label of Web3.
Yep.
How is Neeva evolving and adapting to the ever-advancing Web3 ecosystem?
Yeah, Web3 is early, we have a few efforts going there that I'll talk about in a second. But my sort of crystallization of Web3 is really that it is decentralized storage. Let me put that in context. In my mind, the internet developed to have such a massive impact on the whole world because of decentralized communication protocols, TCP/IP, SMTP, and then HTTP. That laid the foundation. No one controlled HTTP. Anyone that could build a computer could, implement HTTP in like natively in the operating system, or you could get it into a browser. That is really what led to the revolution that we think of as the internet today. It enabled point-to-point communication. It enabled interactions that honestly nobody thought of when they invented HTTP. I think of blockchains as decentralized storage because storage has state. And so it cannot be the same kind of virus that these decentralized communication protocols was. I mean, I used a funny word there, virus. What do I mean by that? There's no central body that is paying for that protocol. Really, all of us with our phone and computers have code that is effectively running because we are paying for the electricity, we are paying for the box that we bought. So unlike those situations in which the network protocols simply rode along with the host devices, storage has state and therefore is not free. I think of blockchain as like the crystallization of that idea of decentralized storage. And because storage is not free, they have essentially implemented a mechanism which is fungible tokens in order to pay for the storage. That's like the essence of Web3. And from there, clearly Web3 is full of scams right now. It's also full of interesting applications. But I think of Web3 now the same way that we thought of the internet back in 94, 95. It is super early. We don't quite know what is going to come out of it. And I'm personally very excited by it because I think a lot is possible. And unlike some others, I don't claim that this is like the new religion that is going to save all of us. It is a technology. It has certain characteristics that I think will strongly drive its growth forward. But what happens to the technology is really up to us, the people that are both going to be creating and using the technology. And then with respect to Neeva itself, one project that we have done is thought about what does it mean to create a Web3 search engine. You can check our site out. It's a fun site, Neeva.xyz. It's not a product. It's not a business. It was more an experimentation of what we could do. We have learned a lot that is pretty cool. We are also creating what we call a Web3 browser. This is a browser that has a wallet built in natively into it, has a lot of safety features so you don't get scammed when you're interacting with dApps on the internet. And so we are active participants in this space, but it's still pretty early. But as I said, the core concept of decentralized storage, in my opinion, is here to stay. And we are like, in like the first ball of the first inning, and there's a lot more to go in terms of what's possible.
On the topic of blockchains, we have some crypto nerds here, and they want to know, do you have future plans to integrate Neeva with Ethereum or another blockchain?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I've struggled with trying to figure out how to put a search engine, all of the technology for a search engine into a blockchain. People have trouble understanding that search is one of the largest, most complicated, most difficult problem ever. Because of the decentralized nature of search, there's no place where you can say, like, what are the pages on the internet? There's a process of discovery. And we deal with like petabyte data sets. Ethereum looks like a fun toy to us, even though their market cap's like $500 billion. So I don't have genuine technical answers to what does it mean to have a search engine on a blockchain. You can swallow stuff the other way around, and that to a certain extent is what .xyz is. We wrote a crawler for our blockchain. We wrote a crawler for fetching data that like NFT data points to. And then we put all of the data through our aggregation and like processing pipelines and load it up into our search stack. So Neeva.xyz is basically Neeva's core search stack, but loaded up with Web3 data. We are actively learning more and trying to figure out what to do. But as I said, I'm not completely sure I understand how to stuff a search engine where my team routinely will talk about petabyte this and petabyte that into Ethereum, let's say.
Let's talk a bit about the competition. You're really kind of in a distinctive market. Over 90% of it is controlled by Google at this point. How are you able to differentiate yourself from your competitors? How are you competing against Google or other players like DuckDuckGo?
We struggle, which is, Google is a well-entrenched product. We talk about Googling things after all, but more than that, they have a set of contracts that lock in their position as the search provider. They make it very hard to switch out. On Safari on iOS, for example, you can't actually change your search engine to Neeva at all, other than by installing an extension that even experienced programmers can't really get through that terrible UX experience. Duck has been around for a while. It's a 13-year-old company. It's a very successful company that uses technology from Bing, both search and ads, and creates like this privacy layer. They do enormous amounts of offline advertising. We have an engineer who is from Alabama, and when he went home, he was like, Sridhar, there are duck ad billboards all over the highways here. We are still trying to find our way in terms of how to penetrate and get that awareness. The reality where Neeva operates in is if a potential user installs our extension, runs a few searches and thinks like this is great, then we have a very high chance of having them stay on and stay as being a Neeva user. But unless they install that extension, the likelihood that one visit will lead to another visit is not very high, mostly because search is a habit for all of us. So the biggest problem that we are concerned about is what is called like top of funnel awareness. We have some ideas, unfortunately, sometimes small companies have to try and be controversial to try and get the attention. We tend to be on the timid side, perhaps kind of reflecting my personality, but we need to stand out. And that's a big issue that a lot of us within Neeva are talking about.
talked a bit about the big players. On the other side of the continuum, we have free open source software like Telegram. Can that kind of software disrupt Neeva in the future, do you think?
I mean, it is one thing to have, software that is open source, but the biggest issue with creating a search engine is really like the application of that software to massive systems. I'm not discounting the fact that it's possible that an open source search engine will come along and disrupt Neeva. That's a great problem for us to have, honestly, because it means like they're worth disrupting. That's a good place. So most of our time is spent figuring out how do we acquire market share? How do we make people understand that they are giving up a lot of agency if they're not using a search engine that's really designed for them. And so we are a lot more focused on that. Yes, things like open source could disrupt, but that's like a problem Google should worry about. Honestly, not a problem that Neeva should worry about.
What about VPNs that offer anonymity while surfing the web? Is there something unique or special about the Neeva user experience compared to using a VPN?
Well, so we are, we're a search engine. A VPN just stops your IP address from being transmitted. IP address is unfortunately very personal, and VPNs can potentially prevent that. Even though it's like a complicated topic, and if people really want to track you, they can do it, even if you use a VPN. But we are much more about a better search experience, and in some sense, we are orthogonal to VPNs. You can think of a VPN as like an add-on over your ISP. The search experience, the browser experience, are still distinct from the VPN.
Well, we have a lot of folks here thinking about the job market. So
Yep.
I want to turn to the next generation and employment opportunities. In terms of hiring, what kind of opportunities do you have available this year, and what kinds of candidates are you looking for?
It's across the board. We hire a lot of software engineers out of school, and they do exceptionally well. We love their energy. We love their fearlessness. We have experienced engineers within Neeva, and also a lot of new college grads. So it's a fun crowd. And so we are, out of college, we routinely hire software engineers, product managers, designers. And as we start increasing, the size of our business team, things like product marketers, people that care about how our product is presented, people perhaps with an active interest in things like social media marketing. But it's more than being on Twitter. It's really, how do you carry the voice of Neeva effectively outside? Remember, I talked to you about sort of 3 words to describe the product. And I had said like ads-free private search engine was like one succinct description. It's a boring description. People go to sleep. It's like, they get what Neeva is about, but as I said, it's also a little bit of a boring description. So we are trying to figure out how we position Neeva, the company, and Neeva, the product, in a way that conveys the factual effectively, while simultaneously conveying the higher sentiment of what the product is about. This is, as I said, search that gives you agency, search that puts you first, search where you're not beholden to big tech, search which is not about like people grabbing and hoarding information. How we convey all of that. So we have a lot of asks across the board. For Web3 in particular, we are also looking for people in what we call developer relations, but that's much more, developers that know the Neeva code base and APIs that we will release very well, and are happy to work with other developers to help them build great products. If you're excited about what Neeva is about and where it can go, we'd love to figure out, and are like, in technology, tech savvy, we would love to figure out what we can do, but those are some of the categories where we're explicitly hiring for.
Could you tell us a bit about the working atmosphere at Neeva? Do you attract a certain kind of personality in employees as well as a skill set?
Great question. I alluded to it earlier. First rule is we are collaborative and respectful, and we want everybody in the company to be valued and everybody to be excellent. We want to be an excellent company, not pick your label company. So that is a baseline. And the other way of putting that is we kind of don't hire prima donnas. We don't hire people that are obnoxious, and so just the work environment is a very is a positive, supportive, collaborative environment. We are hard charging. We want to get a lot of stuff done. I tell people factually, not with pride, simply factually, I work every day. I love the work that I do, and I love how much impact we can have on the world. Not everybody does, and that's fine. Everybody has to find their sort of own balance in life. And so work environment is a collaborative, let's get stuff done. Let's be quick where we need to. Let's be methodical where we sort of need to be. We try to minimize process. So we are all about just enough process for a particular situation. We have a lot of fun. As you know, unfortunately, we have done most of our work remotely, but as COVID wears down, knock on wood, more and more of us are coming back to the Mountain View office. But at this point, we are also fairly open to the idea of a distributed workforce. We have a small team that is in Texas, in Austin, Texas. But we also have a sprinkling of folks that are in other places. It's kind of lonely to be a singleton. So I would not recommend that for people unless there is a strong, kind of reason to. But we are aware of the fact that the work environment has different expectations today, and we are trying to figure out, sort of what we stand for and how we want Neeva to be going forward.
I used to live in Mountain View, and it's a nice place to be. So, endorsement. Words of wisdom to end on. What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs? Top 3.
I guess the top one, I assume this is about, like entrepreneurs and wanting to start a company. I told all of you folks, I was a terrible entrepreneur. It took me a long time to figure out, how to think in that way. And 3 years in, even now I feel like I'm just beginning to get the hang of it. So it's hard. Don't necessarily put a lot of pressure on yourself. And by the way, out of grad school, I went to work for a big company. I went to work for Bilco. I had personal reasons for doing it. I wanted to help my parents buy a house. And so pretty much every dollar that I did not spend in my first year of work, I gave to my dad to help him buy a house. And so to a certain extent, starting a company, there is higher uncertainty about how much money you're going to make, is a choice that you have to make. And it is all answers are fine. You should not feel pressured to start a company where if you're really like, I really want to pay off my college loans and that's my first priority. Don't let people talk you into taking risks. You need to find your own path in life. So that would be the first one. But assuming that you want to be an entrepreneur, my biggest piece of advice would be feel a need. Like, think of something, whether it is through your connections with friends, whether it is through observations, whether it is through a bunch of reading. The essence of creating a company is feeling the needs of, ideally, a large set of people and crystallizing a solution for that need into a compact product. If you talk to, if you have an idea, you talk to 20 people and they all give you completely different ways in which that problem should be solved. And you cannot come up with like this crystallization that I am talking about. It's a good indication that perhaps that's not the right thing to be working on. The magic of a startup, the magic of software is like this compact surface area, is this tight little ball that can solve a lot of problems that a lot of people have in a particular domain. This does not, you can create products for thousands of people. You can create products for tens of thousands of people. You can create products for billions of people. But the thing that is common to all of them is that clarity of need and crystallization of the solution. So that's the biggest piece of advice. Second piece of advice, don't do it alone. Startups are just miserably hard. You're going to have terrible days. I guarantee you that. You need a partner. You need a partner that is going to be there on the good days, on the bad days. So, my thing is like entrepreneurship is not a lone wolf game. Don't do it. And you want a partner that like elevates you. You want a partner where, the output is the best of your ideas. Sometimes you end up in partnerships where the collective output is really like the minimum of your capabilities. You want to think about, does this work, does working with this person actually produce better ideas than what I could have done for myself? Vivek, my co-founder, is 10 years younger than me. He and I think about risk. He and I think about ideas very, very differently. But I can assure you that, our output always aspires to be, how do we bring out the best in both of us? And to me, that quality is really, really important. When you're going down this journey, as I said, doing a startup is just really hard and really difficult.
Great, thank you. The hour has flown by. We appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your experiences. Give a round of applause, Sridhar.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be able to talk to you folks. I didn't attend Duke, obviously, but there are many wonderful friends that I have from Duke. It's an amazing college. You're all very, very privileged. Yeah, I hope you have lots of fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Thank you so much, Sridhar and Dr. for that. What a great way to kick off IDEATE. We hope you're inspired for your own design thinking process for this weekend and onwards. So as promised, we have the sign-in form for you guys here. There we go. So if you scan the QR code, you can sign in. That's your raffle entry for this event. And that wraps up the opening ceremony. We have lots more workshops today in the guidebook. So we hope we'll see you guys there. The next one is at 1 p.m. Given by Nina Polson, who works at Google as other lead designers. She'll be talking about the design ideation process and doing a workshop that's very interactive. So if you join us in person, that's in Hudson 125. There's also the Zoom link on the guidebook. And yeah, thank you so much for coming out, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the weekend.